Welcome to Death on Clare Island, Chapter 10B. Aunt Georgina had been kind enough to deliver the new dress which I found on my bed. I was elated to see that she'd also lit the fire in the living room. Tired, I suddenly longed to pass the evening in front of the flames while reading a good book rather than go out to dinner. This sentiment was compounded by the sight of the silky material now draped across my bed. I worried about giving Peter the wrong impression. I wanted to stay in my comfort zone, looking for what was lost. Was there something wrong with me, or did I miss Dylan too much? I realized I didn't have an answer. Impatient for action, I decided to call Tranquility House now. I did, making an appointment to see the administrator on Tuesday. After that, I took time to wash my hair. As I lounged in front of the fireplace, towel drying my short bob, I admitted to myself that I did harbor some attraction to Peter, and part of it, I knew, had to do with his philanthropic efforts, which were impressive. The cuckoo clock in the kitchen interrupted my ruminations. This turned out to be advantageous as it brought me swiftly back to rationality. What was I thinking? I didn't have the time or the heart for attachments. And as soon as I fulfilled my commitment to Bridget, I'd be on the next plane back to the United States. Furthermore, based on the news from the Ackle parish priest, the dream of finding my birth mother here seemed more distant than ever. 15 minutes later, as I was raking my fingers through my hair for the last time, the front doorbell rang. Peter certainly was punctual, I had to give him that. I opened the door. Once again, his appearance was impeccable, everything pressed and every hair in place. He wore charcoal gray slacks, a white turtleneck, and a navy jacket. The contrast of the turtleneck and jacket complemented his ebony eyes and black hair. I invited him in while I went to get my coat. When we stepped outside, I was surprised to see an S-Class black Mercedes sedan. I'd figured him for something a bit smaller and less unobtrusive. I was about to ask him about his choice in cars and where he kept it. Then his arm curved around my back and gently guided me into the front seat. Deciding to just enjoy the moment, I said nothing. Peter had chosen the Kirk Restaurant, named for its original function as a church. Built in 1863 for a congregation of Presbyterians, which became extinct within 30 years, the building lay dormant until someone in the 1950s, when the interior was refurbished and transformed into a family-owned restaurant through several generations. We followed the waiter up a set of stone steps to the balcony, which looked as though it formerly served as the church's nave. Flickering tea lights cast shadows against the stone walls. Other couples occupying the few tables leaned in toward each other, speaking in hushed voices. Faint strains of violins, fiddles, and Julian pipes colored the air. My breathing deepened and slowed as I inhaled the intimacy of the setting. The musical echoes of history tugged at my heart, and my mind wandered to the future, imagining what it would be like to fall in love again. Star, you look beautiful, Peter said, looking up from the menu and fixing his gaze on me. I'm happy you agreed to have dinner with me. I don't get off Clare Island enough. To be honest, I replied, I almost canceled dinner. Looking into Matthew's life has kept me busy the last few days. I'm so tired, I was tempted to call it an early night. Yes, I tried to ask you about that earlier when we were on the phone, but you rang off so quickly. So what's all this about? You said you're investigating Matthew Sumner's death? Yeah, Aunt Georgina told Matthew's sister Bridget about my work as a researcher and information broker. I looked down at my ever present, although at present not particularly useful, lime green case which held my phone. She's asked me to see if I can learn anything more about Matthew than what the police uncovered. She doesn't accept their decision that this was a low level drug incident gone wrong. That's absurd. Why should she question their judgment? And what does she expect you to do about that? I don't know what I can do other than ask questions and interview people who knew Matthew. I paused to butter the crusty roll the waiter had left on my bread plate. What about you? Did you ever meet Matthew during one of his walks around Clare Island? Me? Peter laughed. No way. I'm not one of them, as they like to say out there. He raised his eyebrows. As far as the natives are concerned, this Yank is still a stranger, even after 3 years. Other than the odd hello at the shop when I'm picking up groceries, everyone ignores me. I nodded and remembered how, after Matthew's body was found, I was able to drift in and out of the groups on the beach, and no one acknowledged me. Peter continued, Well, I'm glad you changed your mind about not canceling dinner. Do you have any ideas about how he came into possession of the drugs they found on his body? Nothing other than what the police surmised, I replied, that he was a low-level user. But I found a brochure for a drug rehab center in his townhouse. I'm driving to Dublin on Tuesday to see if there's any connection. I closed my menu, having decided on the wild Irish salmon. Why don't we go together then? I haven't had a break from the island in months. Besides, I have to confess that I'd use any excuse to spend more time with you. He reached across and gently squeezed my hand before taking up his glass of water. Well, I said, enjoying the warmth of his touch in spite of my reservations. It's a long ride, and I enjoy having company, so I'll make you a deal. I'll bring lunch if you do the driving. I surprised myself with this. Maybe it was the romantic setting, but I suddenly looked forward to spending more time with him. Done, he said with a smile. Dinner arrived, and I filled him in on what I'd learned so far about Matthew from his sister and Richard O'Malley. It wasn't much, I realized. Peter's hand beat a rhythm on the table while he listened, and I appreciated his attentiveness. Unlike Lorcan, Peter didn't try to discourage me from the investigation. When I finished, he nodded slowly and said, So you haven't made much headway yet? No, it's been slow going thus far, but I just don't believe that Matthew was a user. He's been too productive not to have been clean. I've heard that he was up and coming in art circles. Hasn't anyone considered that he just might have lost his footing while sketching or something? It happens quite often. That's one of the reasons for the island's helipad. Peter shook his head before continuing. As a former Navy man, I wouldn't go as close to those cliffs as I see so many others do. The waiter came over then and took down our dessert order. Then I asked Peter about his business and whether he enjoyed it. Enjoy it, he laughed. I love it, Star. Imagine a child whose father's motto was spare the rod, spoil the child. My father was a doctor and we were wealthy, but he didn't believe in spending his money. While everyone else in high school received a Mustang convertible for graduation, my father bought me a bicycle. Dessert came, and he was soon savoring every bite of his carrot cake. So here I am now, enjoying a wealth that I never imagined, and even more importantly, the freedom to come and go as I please, doing something that I love. There's a lot of truth in that old saying, wherever you go, go with all your heart. I smiled. That explained the Mercedes. But why antiques? And why a newsletter? Well, after college and my Navy service, I went into real estate and realized that many of the homes on the market had old furniture, some of which were not just beautiful, but also had real value in the antique business. So I began buying pieces of furniture and paintings as well from the owners when I'd list the houses. He paused to add some cream to the coffee the waiter had just brought. Before I knew it, I found myself in the market of finding old pieces for collectors. Word of mouth brought me commissions to transport furniture between Europe and the US. When I discovered Ireland, I decided it was a perfect place to base my operation, then branch out with the newsletter. I wish my dad could see me now. It sounds fascinating, I said. I pictured myself searching through catalogs and museums trying to find out the history of a piece of furniture. I imagined the owners, what their life might have been like, whose hands had polished the piece, who might have pounded it with a fist, or slept on it, or hidden behind it. Fidgeting in my seat, I was suddenly anxious to get back to my computers, databases, and information brokering. Peter glanced down at his watch. I have an early appointment tomorrow, and judging from what you've told me about your investigation, you need rest too. How about I get you home before your carriage turns into a pumpkin and you decide not to have dinner with me again? That sounds reasonable enough, I said, and we both rose from our seats.